Welcome back, Love Nation. This is Nina. Make sure you guys like, share, and subscribe. Thank you to everybody that has been coming to my channel. Like this video, share this video, and hit that notification bell so you guys know when I drop my next one. We're going to get straight into part 6 of reading the lawsuit of Fat Joe's ex-hype man, TA, suing him over work conditions, pay, PPP loan scams, allegedly. There's a lot of mess in here. Let's just get going. Again, this is part 6. Section D, coercive control, psychological manipulation, and threats of harm. Defendant Fat Joe's control over plaintiff extended far beyond mere financial exploitation or denial of credit. Over 16 years, defendant cultivated a deliberate environment of psychological manipulation, intimidation, and persistent threats to ensure plaintiff's continued submission, silence, and loyalty despite ongoing abuse, exploitation, and humiliation. Defendant Fat Joe frequently warned plaintiff with chilling explicitness, repeatedly stating, "Nobody leaves Terror Squad in one piece." He often reinforced his threat by openly referencing former associates who had suffered pawpaw reprisals after falling out of favor. For example, defendants explicitly invoked the notorious assault on Louis Cuban Link, Teben. Excuse me if I didn't say that. I don't know if it's Tybin or Teben. We're just going to say Teben, who was viciously attacked and permanently scarred and publicly humiliated following his departure from defendant's circle. These statements were not mere idle threats or exaggerations. They constituted explicit and calculated warnings, deliberately issued to plaintiff to convey that any act of resistance, disloyalty, or demand for fair treatment would inevitably lead to severe harm, public disgrace, and professional sabotage, or worse. Through these sustained and credible threats, defendant intentionally reinforced the message that plaintiff had no viable path to safely exit their working relationship or demand rightful compensation without facing devastating personal consequences. Defendant methodically cultivated an atmosphere where fear of retaliation, abandonment abroad, and career destruction permeated plaintiff's daily experience, effectively destroying any notion of autonomy or genuine choice. Plaintiff's working conditions were oppressive and unpredictable, deliberately designed to amplify his vulnerability and dependency. The defendant employed persistent verbal abuse, threats of pawing, erratic and insufficient payment, manipulative control over travel and accommodations, and continuous humiliation. Collectively, these coercive tactics resulted in chronic emotional and psychological distress, profound anxiety, and severe trauma that continue to affect plaintiff to this day. Plaintiff was systematically denied basic security and stability, with defendant frequently threatening to strand him in foreign locations without resources or assistance. On multiple occasions, these threats became a reality, leaving plaintiff stranded and without access to adequate food, shelter, or safe transit home, further intensifying his fear, insecurity, and forced dependency. The consistent invocation of past acts of the V word by defendant, such as the brutal attack on Cuban Link, was an intentional strategy. Defendant purposely leveraged these prior acts to establish the credibility and immediacy of his threats and effective placing plaintiff in a constant state of apprehension and psychological captivity. The looming threat of this harm was not hypothetical but concrete, continuously reinforced by explicit verbal warnings and visible reminders of prior acts. The cumulative psychological harm inflicted upon plaintiff by defendant coercive methods was profound and lasting. Over 16 years, the defendant sustained use of intimidation, threats, emotional manipulation, economic control, and forced isolation, resulted in plaintiff suffering severe emotional injuries, including chronic anxiety, debilitating fear symptoms consistent with post traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, loss of self esteem, and lasting damage to his mental and emotional well being. Defendant's use of V word, threats, and psychological intimidation was a calculated tactic, integral to maintaining control over plaintiff and securing ongoing submission and compliance. These methods of coercion went far beyond mere workplace disputes or contractual disagreements, constituting explicit acts of extortion, intimidation, and forced labor. Each threat, warning, and act of psychological manipulation was deliberate, reinforcing defendant's dominance and perpetrating plaintiff's involuntary labor in silence. Collectively, these coercive tactics demonstrate a calculated and sustained pattern of psychological and emotional abuse, intentionally implemented by defendant Fat Joe and his associates to maintain plaintiff's exploitation, submission, and silence. Section E. Adult activity, exploitation, and humiliation under duress. In addition to systematic financial exploitation and relentless psychological abuse, defendant Fat Joe deliberately subjected plaintiff Dixon to repeated and severe adult activity, coercion, manipulation, and humiliation, which further deepened defendant's total control over plaintiff's autonomy, physical safety, and labor. Throughout plaintiff's 16-year period, working closely with defendant, plaintiff was routinely coerced into engaging in adult activities with women specifically brought by defendant Fat Joe's hotel room and private gatherings following performances and studio events. Defendant Fat Joe frequently arranged and orchestrated these encounters, intentionally creating scenarios designed to reinforce plaintiff's complete submission. Defendant Fat Joe regularly monitored these encounters closely, frequently remaining in the room to watch, record, or provide explicit direction and commands. Plaintiff did not willingly consent to participate in these acts. Instead, plaintiff submitted solely out of fear of an immediate retaliation, which defendant repeatedly demonstrated would include financial punishment, professional sabotage, abandonment in foreign countries, or physical pawpawing. On at least one occasion, plaintiff explicitly resisted participating in a coerced encounter arranged by defendant. Defendant immediately retaliated by canceling plaintiff's scheduled flight home, deliberately restraining plaintiff without money, shelter, or support, thereby intentionally placing him in an isolated, unsafe, and highly vulnerable position abroad. These calculated and repeated acts of adult coercion served as a purpose in defendant's enterprise, reinforcing plaintiff's ongoing subordination, obedience, and silence through humiliation, fear, and psychological domination. Adult acts compliance became a condition of plaintiff's continued employment, access to essential resources, safe travel, and basic human dignity. The defendant's use of coercive adult acts, underpinned by the threat of job loss, abandonment, or physical harm, meets the definition of adult traffic by coercion under U.S.C. Section 1591. Adult acts were induced not by choice but by fear, independency, and fraud. Each encounter carried an unspoken message: refuse and you lose everything. Plaintiff estimates that over 16 years, he was coerced into more than 4,000 adult activities to maintain his standing with the enterprise. The defendant used these acts not merely for gratification, but as a control mechanism. By degrading plaintiff repeatedly and in front of others, he undermined plaintiff's autonomy, silenced his resistance, and made him emotionally and physically dependent on defendant's approval. The psychological toll was immense. The plaintiff developed symptoms consistent with PTSD, including flashbacks, intrusive thoughts, panic attacks, and emotional detachment. He remains in trauma informed therapy and continues to experience debilitating anxiety. These experiences were not private or confidential. Enterprise members, including JB, Raw, Pistol Pete, and security staff, routinely witnessed and participated in these coercive dynamics. Rock Nation, which assumed managerial control of defendant Fat Joe's business operations in 2017, had ample opportunity to detect, disrupt, or report these patterns of abuse. Instead, it enabled and benefited from them, earning commissions, royalties, and reputational capital off the back of plaintiff's silence. The forced adult acts described in this section, coupled with the economic manipulation and verbal threats, form a textbook example of adult traffic under federal law, warranting treble damages, injunctive relief, and criminal referral under USC 18, 1591, and 1595. I am going to pause right here. We are definitely going to be getting into a lot of drama with the allegations from this lawsuit. I definitely want to know what you guys think with this. Do you think this lawsuit is leading into something more inevitable down the line with all of these people being exposed allegedly? Tell me what you think, you guys. Like, share, subscribe. Till next time, be safe and enjoy your day. Bye, guys.